Arthur Silva, the first black captain of a small-town police force, has always known his journey would be fraught with challenges. But when he's publicly humiliated by a racist officer, Victor Hale, who doesn't recognize him as his superior, Arthur's world is thrown into chaos. As the encounter goes viral and tensions rise in the town, Arthur faces a choice: expose Victor's hate or dig deeper into the corruption that runs far beyond one man's prejudice. In a gripping tale of justice and redemption, Arthur embarks on a dangerous investigation, uncovering a web of corruption that threatens to consume the entire department. When an operation spirals out of control and Victor's life hangs in the balance, it's Arthur who risks everything to save the man who despised him. Now, with the truth on the line, both men must decide if they can put the past behind them and unite against the forces tearing their town apart. Under the Same Badge is an emotionally charged story of courage, redemption, and the power of confronting hatred with compassion. Captain Arthur Silva has always known that being a black man in law enforcement comes with challenges. But nothing could prepare him for the day he is publicly humiliated by a racist police officer who doesn't realize Arthur is his superior. As the newest captain of a small-town police force, Arthur has earned respect through hard work and integrity, but when he is stopped and degraded by Officer Victor Hale during a routine off-duty encounter, it sets off a firestorm. The incident, captured on video and shared online, ignites racial tensions in the community. As the town spirals into chaos, Arthur is faced with a choice: seek immediate revenge by exposing Victor or dig deeper and uncover the hidden forces pulling the strings behind the scenes. As Arthur investigates, he discovers that Victor's racism is only part of a much larger problem, a deep-rooted corruption within the police department tied to powerful figures in the town. But instead of destroying Victor's career, Arthur chooses a different path, one that challenges both men in ways they never expected. When a dangerous police operation goes horribly wrong, Victor's life is at risk, and it's Arthur who steps in to save him. In the aftermath, Arthur reveals his true identity in a moment that forces Victor to confront not only his own prejudices, but also the man who saved him. Now, with the tables turned, Victor must decide if he has the courage to change and join Arthur in dismantling the corruption that has plagued their department. Under the Same Badge is a gripping and emotionally charged tale of justice, redemption, and the transformative power of confronting hatred with compassion. Captain Arthur Silva. Physical description: Arthur is a tall, well-built black man in his late 30s, with close-cropped hair flecked with hints of gray, and deep brown eyes that convey both authority and empathy. His face bears subtle signs of the hardships he has faced, but his posture is always upright and composed, symbolizing his inner strength. Backstory: born and raised in a rough neighborhood, Arthur fought hard to rise through the ranks of the police force, often facing both overt and covert racism. His leadership style is calm yet firm, deeply committed to justice and fairness. His personal life is marked by a deep love for his community, though the pressure of his job has left him somewhat isolated. He carries the weight of responsibility, knowing he must navigate both sides of the racial divide in a tense town. Officer Victor Hale. Physical description: Victor is in his late 20s, with sandy blonde hair, sharp blue eyes, and a square jaw. He is muscular and fit, his confident posture exuding a sense of authority, though at times, his stance can appear defensive. His face often carries a smirk of arrogance that hides his underlying insecurities. Backstory: raised in a troubled household where racism was normalized, Victor grew up with a chip on his shoulder, believing that being tough was the only way to survive. His father was a disgraced ex-cop who instilled a twisted sense of pride in the badge. Joining the force was his way of gaining control and power, but Victor's beliefs are challenged when Arthur enters his life, forcing him to confront his biases and the corruption he's entangled in. Chief Marcus Turner. Physical description: Marcus is an older black man in his early 60s, with graying hair, a stoic face, and a slightly hunched posture from years of carrying the weight of the job. His eyes are sharp and calculating, always assessing the situation, while his expressions are often inscrutable. Backstory: as the police chief, Marcus is a veteran of the force who has seen it all. He was once a mentor to Arthur, guiding him through the political landscape of law enforcement. Though a well-respected leader, Marcus has become more cynical over the years, often choosing to compromise to survive in the system. He secretly knows about the corruption in the department, but believes that fighting it could cost him everything, including his career. Maria Silva. Physical description. Maria is a striking black woman in her early 30s with natural curls, warm brown skin, and expressive dark eyes. She is slender but athletic, with a calm, reassuring presence that softens even the hardest conversations. Backstory. Arthur's younger sister, Maria, works as a social worker in the same community where they grew up. Her passion is helping underprivileged families, and she is often the voice of reason and compassion in Arthur's life. Maria constantly encourages her brother to lead with empathy and to never forget his roots, even as he navigates the complexities of his career. The police department. The station is a mix of modern and outdated, reflecting the town's struggle between progress and tradition. Gray walls, fluorescent lighting, and stark metal desks create a cold, impersonal atmosphere. The hallways are narrow, and the air always seems tense. In Arthur's office, there are personal touches, framed photos, books on leadership, and community service awards that contrast with the sterile environment of the rest of the building. The department itself is divided, with whispers of corruption among the older officers and a few younger recruits, while others are dedicated to honest work. Downtown. The heart of the small town, downtown is a mix of historical buildings and newer, gentrified establishments. The town square has a large fountain surrounded by benches where older residents sit and talk, while nearby cafes cater to younger crowds. The streets are always busy, with a mix of locals and visitors. The town feels both quaint and divided. While there's a sense of community on the surface, racial and economic disparities are evident in the interactions of its people. Arthur's childhood neighborhood. Arthur grew up in a predominantly black, working-class neighborhood on the outskirts of town. The area has its share of struggles, with abandoned houses and graffiti-covered walls, but it is also filled with life and resilience. Children play in the streets, and local vendors sell food on the corners. The neighborhood is a place of memories for Arthur, both of hardship and of the strong sense of community that shaped him. The Rusty Bar. A dimly lit bar on the edge of town frequented by police officers and local blue-collar workers. The walls are covered in memorabilia from the town's past, and there's a sense of history to the place, though it also harbors an undercurrent of division. It's here that Victor often hangs out with other officers, and where some of the darker aspects of the police force come to light. The bar serves as a setting for tense conversations and the building of camaraderie, but it's also where corruption festers. The abandoned warehouse. Located on the outskirts of town, the abandoned warehouse is an eerie, dilapidated building used as a meeting point for those involved in the corrupt dealings Arthur uncovers. The windows are shattered, and the air is heavy with the smell of decay and dust. It's a stark reminder of the industrial decline that left parts of the town in ruin, and it serves as the backdrop for key confrontations in the story. Arthur's day begins. Arthur's morning routine introduces his connection to the community and hints at tensions in his role as captain. Arthur feels the weight of responsibility, anticipating a challenging day. Tension at the police department. Arthur enters the station, sensing division within the force. Victor's arrogance is introduced. Arthur becomes more aware of the growing tensions among his officers. The chief's warning. Chief Marcus Turner hints at corruption in the department and advises Arthur to tread carefully. Arthur becomes determined to uncover the truth, setting up an internal conflict. The encounter with Victor. Victor harasses Arthur, unaware of his rank, humiliating him in public. This sparks the main conflict, leading Arthur to investigate Victor. Aftermath of the humiliation. Arthur struggles with his emotions at home after the encounter. His sister Maria encourages him to take action. Arthur decides not to retaliate immediately, opting for a strategic approach. The viral aftermath. The video of Arthur's humiliation goes viral, creating tension within the department. Arthur plans to investigate the corruption, while Victor remains ignorant of his mistake. Uncovering the network. Quiet determination. Arthur works discreetly, gathering information on Victor and other officers linked to corruption. Arthur realizes that the corruption runs deeper than anticipated. Confronting Marcus. Arthur confronts Chief Turner about the corruption. Marcus is evasive, revealing the complexity of the situation. Arthur understands that Marcus is compromised, but is still useful, keeping him close. Victor in the spotlight. Victor's ego swells as the department downplays the viral video. He continues his reckless behavior. Victor's growing arrogance exposes him to more risk. Arthur's investigation deepens. Arthur meets with local activists and community leaders, gathering insights into how deep the corruption runs. Arthur gains allies who will help him in his fight against the system. Maria's concerns. Maria expresses fear for Arthur's safety, urging him to prioritize his personal well-being. Arthur comforts her, but is increasingly isolated by his mission. A clue from the past. Arthur finds evidence that links Victor's family to the corrupt power structure. Victor's father was involved in shady dealings. Arthur now has a clue connecting Victor to the larger network. The web unravels Victor's growing paranoia as Arthur's investigation intensifies. Victor becomes paranoid, sensing the changing mood of the department. Victor begins to suspect that his position may be under threat. A risky alliance. Arthur meets a former police informant who has connections to the city's corrupt powers. Arthur uncovers a major upcoming operation linked to the criminal network. Split in the ranks. Arthur's leadership is tested as officers begin to choose sides between reform and corruption. Tensions within the department rise, making Arthur's job even more precarious. Victor's demise. Victor makes a critical mistake, revealing his involvement in a small-time illegal operation. Arthur quietly takes note. This exposes a vulnerability that Arthur can exploit. The chief's dilemma. Chief Turner's reluctance to act reveals more about his compromised position. He suggests that he is protecting someone higher up. Arthur realizes that the corruption is even bigger than just Victor or the police force. It involves powerful figures in the city. The trap is set. Arthur sets a plan in motion to expose the corruption ring, using Victor's illegal activities as leverage. Arthur now has a strategy to not only confront Victor, but dismantle the entire operation. Confrontations and confessions. Confronting Victor. Arthur confronts Victor in private, offering him a chance to confess and help expose the corruption. Victor is shaken but refuses, still clinging to his racist and arrogant mindset. A growing threat. The corrupt ring discovers Arthur's investigation and begins to conspire against him, putting his life at risk. Arthur is forced to move faster, knowing that he is now a target. Victor's crisis. Victor faces personal consequences. His reputation begins to crumble, and he becomes more isolated. Victor begins to question his own beliefs, though he is not yet ready to admit it. The chief's confession. Chief Turner finally admits to Arthur that he is protecting a local politician with ties to Victor and corruption. Arthur realizes the scale of the fight he is facing, but refuses to back down. A dangerous operation. A major police operation goes wrong and Victor finds himself in mortal danger during a police raid. Arthur must decide whether to let Victor fall or save him, knowing that doing so could change everything. The rescue. In a climactic moment, Arthur saves Victor's life, risking his own in the process. Victor is forced to confront his hatred, creating an opening for a possible redemption arc. The aftermath and redemption. Victor's shame. Victor is overcome with guilt after Arthur saves his life, and the reality of his racism sets in. Victor begins to question his past choices and beliefs, beginning his path toward redemption. The investigation expands. Arthur now has enough evidence to take down the corrupt network, but the stakes are higher with more powerful players involved. Arthur prepares for a final showdown with the city's corrupt leaders. Victor's decision. Victor, struggling with his guilt, chooses to help Arthur expose the corruption, risking his own career in the process. Victor's decision marks a turning point in his character, shifting from antagonist to reluctant ally. The final showdown. Arthur and Victor work together to expose the corrupt network, leading to the arrests of key figures in the city. The department is finally purged of the worst corruption, and justice is served. A city transformed. The city begins to heal as the community responds to the overthrow of the corrupt leaders, and tensions within the department ease. Arthur's mission is a success, though he is left scarred from the battle. The path forward. Victor visits Arthur in the final scene, apologizing for his past actions and expressing a desire to change. Arthur acknowledges him, leaving the door open for future redemption. The story ends on a hopeful note, with the promise of a better future for the city and for the two men who were once enemies. The morning light filtered softly through the curtains, casting a warm glow across Arthur's bedroom. He rose from the bed, feeling the familiar weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. He moved through his morning routine with quiet efficiency: shower, breakfast, check emails. The texts from his sister Maria buzzed in, as usual, a small beacon of comfort in his day. "Hey, just checking in. You good? Don't forget the community meeting tomorrow. Stay safe, big bro." Arthur smiled slightly, knowing Maria's concern was always genuine, especially given his new position. It had only been a few months since he was promoted to captain of the town's police force, a rare achievement for a black man in their small, racially divided town. He knew the significance of his position, not just for himself, but for the community that had watched him rise. And today was going to be a hard day. As he sipped his coffee, Arthur's phone buzzed again. This time, a message from Chief Marcus Turner. It was vague, but it was clear the day's meeting would be important. Arthur felt a pang of anticipation, knowing there were issues lurking within the department, issues that needed confronting. Arthur walked through the doors of the police station, greeted by the sterile scent of paperwork and metal desks. The station was a mix of modern upgrades and the weight of history. The halls buzzed with activity, officers moving between tasks, some nodding respectfully at Arthur, while others avoided his gaze. He felt the tension immediately. There was an undercurrent in the department, a division he had sensed since his promotion. He passed a cluster of officers, their voices lowered, though he could hear the laughter and the offhand jokes. He kept walking. As he entered his office, he saw Officer Victor Hale across the hall. Victor's sharp blue eyes met his for a moment before the young officer smirked, brushing by with an air of arrogance. Victor didn't even acknowledge Arthur as his superior, a habit Arthur had noticed growing worse by the day. Arthur clenched his jaw but said nothing. Victor's attitude had been on his radar for weeks. He was reckless, entitled, and he had no idea the trouble he was walking into. The door to Chief Marcus Turner's office closed with a soft click behind Arthur. Turner, a veteran of the force, sat behind his desk, his expression as stoic as always. His graying hair and slightly hunched posture were signs of the years spent leading the force, but there was a sharpness in his eyes that never dulled. "Arthur," Turner began, "we've got problems." Arthur sat down, feeling the tension mount. "I've noticed," he replied, his tone careful. Turner sighed, rubbing his temples. "There's more going on in this department than just day-to-day issues. Corruption. It runs deep, and there are people, powerful people in town, tied to some of our officers." Arthur's stomach tightened. He had suspected as much, but hearing it from Turner confirmed his fears. "You need to be careful," Turner said, his voice lowering. "This isn't something you can fix overnight. The moment you start pushing too hard, the pushback will be swift." Arthur nodded, the weight of the words settling in. "I'll be careful." Turner's eyes softened for a moment, a rare glimpse of the mentor Arthur had known. "Don't let them get to you, Arthur. You've worked too hard to get here." Arthur left the office with a renewed sense of determination. There was rot in the department, and Victor Hale was just the tip of the iceberg. The day stretched into late afternoon, and Arthur, off duty, found himself walking down the gentrified part of town. He had stopped by a cafe, his civilian clothes giving him a brief reprieve from the authority he wore like armor. He enjoyed these moments of anonymity, though he knew they were rare. As he walked toward his car, a police cruiser pulled up. Arthur recognized the vehicle immediately. It was Victor's. The young officer stepped out, his smirk still in place as he approached Arthur. "Hey, you," Victor said, his tone dripping with condescension. "What are you doing in this part of town?" Arthur looked at him, calm but alert. "Just walking. Is there a problem?" Victor's smirk widened. "Yeah, there is. You don't look like you belong here." He gestured vaguely at the upscale surroundings, his words heavy with implication. The exchange was brief, but it escalated quickly. Victor, not realizing who Arthur was in plain clothes, pushed harder. His words turning sharper, his stance more aggressive. A small crowd began to gather, their phones out, recording. Arthur could feel the anger rising within him, but he kept his composure. He had been through this before. The insults, the degradation, it was nothing new. But this time, it was different. This time, he had the power to strike back. But he didn't. He let Victor continue, humiliating him, right there in the middle of the street. The scene would be all over the internet by nightfall. Arthur's fists clenched at his sides, but he said nothing. He simply walked away. That evening, Arthur sat at his kitchen table, his mind replaying the encounter with Victor. The rage simmered beneath his calm exterior, his knuckles still white from gripping the edge of the table. The video had already gone viral. He knew because Maria had called him within minutes of it hitting social media. Her voice crackled through the phone, sharp with emotion. "Arthur, you have to do something about this. Everyone's seen it. You can't just let this go." "I know," he said quietly, "but I need to think." Maria's frustration was palpable. "You can't just stand by while he humiliates you like that, especially not in public." Arthur's heart ached with the weight of it all. He knew she was right, but there was something deeper gnawing at him. He couldn't act on impulse. "Not yet. I'll handle it," he assured her. "But I can't just blow this up. Not without understanding what's really going on." There was a pause, and then Maria's voice softened. "I trust you, Arthur. Just don't let them break you." As the call ended, Arthur stared at the wall, his mind racing. He wouldn't retaliate immediately. He had to play the long game. Victor was only a symptom of the larger problem. The corruption ran deeper, and Arthur needed to know exactly how far it went before making his move. The next morning, the police station buzzed with a different kind of energy. The video of Arthur's humiliation had taken the town by storm, and everyone had seen it. As Arthur walked through the halls, he could feel the eyes on him, some filled with sympathy, others with barely concealed amusement. Victor, still unaware of Arthur's identity, strutted through the station with an air of untouchable arrogance. The department wasn't taking the video seriously. It was being dismissed as just another altercation. But Arthur knew better. This was only the beginning. As he entered his office and closed the door, Arthur's mind whirled with the possibilities. The viral video had set something in motion. Now, it was time to dig deeper, to find out just how far the corruption spread, and what role Victor played in it. He wasn't just going to expose Victor. He was going to tear down the entire rotten system. The echo of footsteps against the hard floors of the police station rang in Arthur's ears as he arrived early the next morning. He hadn't slept much. The viral fallout from yesterday's public humiliation lingered in his mind, but he had moved past his initial anger. Now, there was only cold resolve. If he was going to make a difference in this town, he had to be strategic. Retaliating against Victor wouldn't fix the underlying corruption festering in the department. No, this was much bigger than a racist cop with a badge. Arthur sat down at his desk, closing the door behind him. It was time to investigate, to quietly gather intel without drawing attention. He started making a list of officers he knew were clean, those he could trust, and those who might be compromised. Chief Turner's cryptic warning weighed heavily on him, but Arthur knew that digging deeper was the only way to understand the full scope of what he was up against. As he sifted through records, small patterns began to emerge. Unexplained promotions, officers consistently assigned to certain parts of town, frequent contact with a local developer known for cutting corners. This wasn't just a few bad apples. It was an organized network. Cause/effect. Arthur realizes the corruption goes deeper than anticipated. His resolve strengthens as he begins to piece together the connections, fueling his desire to dismantle the network from within. Arthur knew the next step was a conversation with Chief Turner. There were too many gaps, and Marcus had always been careful with his words. But if Arthur was going to take action, he needed more transparency from his mentor. He knocked on the door of Turner's office, entering when called. Marcus glanced up from his paperwork, his expression guarded. "Arthur, I figured you'd come in early." Arthur leaned against the doorframe, folding his arms. "We need to talk, Marcus. You said corruption is running through the department, but you were vague. I need to know what we're really dealing with." The chief leaned back in his chair, his eyes narrowing slightly. "You're asking for details I've been carefully keeping out of sight for years. You think I don't know who's dirty in this place? You think I haven't tried to handle it my way?" Arthur didn't back down. "I'm not interested in playing politics, Marcus. If we're going to clean this up, I need to know who's involved." A heavy silence fell between them. The chief sighed, rubbing a hand over his tired eyes. It's not just a few officers, Arthur. It's half the department, and they're protected by people with power, politicians, businessmen. The moment you pull on one thread, the whole thing unravels. Arthur's jaw tightened. He'd expected resistance, but hearing it confirmed from someone he trusted hit harder than he thought. So, what do you suggest? We sit back and watch this place fall apart. Marcus looked at him sharply. No, but don't be reckless. If you come at them head-on, they'll bury you. We need to be smart. Cause/effect. Arthur understands the complexity of the situation. Marcus is compromised but still valuable as an ally. Arthur decides to keep him close, knowing he'll need Turner's support as he navigates this dangerous game. Victor Hale strode through the station like a man untouchable. His arrogance had only grown after the viral video. He was basking in the attention, oblivious to the fact that it had painted a target on his back for more than just public criticism. Arthur watched from a distance, noticing how other officers either fell in line behind Victor or kept their distance. It was clear who felt empowered by his behavior and who was growing increasingly uncomfortable. Victor smirked as he passed Arthur in the hall, the air thick with tension. It was like he didn't even remember the encounter from yesterday. No remorse, no acknowledgement of the public humiliation he had caused. But Arthur wasn't looking for an apology. He was studying him, watching how Victor interacted with others. Later that day, Arthur saw Victor leave the station early with two other officers he knew to be dirty, officers with mysterious assets and unchecked power. Arthur made a mental note. If Victor was involved in something bigger, this was the clue. Cause/effect. Victor's inflated ego leads him to take more risks, exposing himself further. Arthur recognizes that Victor's recklessness could be the key to unraveling the larger network of corruption. That evening, Arthur took a different route home. Instead of heading straight to his house, he drove downtown, where local community leaders and activists often gathered. He parked and entered a small cafe that had become a hub for quiet resistance. It was here that he could tap into the pulse of the community, the people who had long seen the cracks in the system. He spotted a familiar face near the back. Jerome, a local activist with deep roots in the community, sat nursing a cup of coffee. Arthur joined him, greeting him with a nod. "Long day?" Jerome asked, his eyes sharp. "You could say that," Arthur replied. "I need information. I'm looking into some officers. There's a network running through the department. You've heard anything on the streets?" Jerome leaned back, considering Arthur's question carefully. "I've heard whispers. Developers, business interests. There's money moving around that doesn't belong in anyone's pockets. And a few of your officers have been seen doing favors. I wouldn't be surprised if some of them are tied to local politicians." Arthur nodded, taking it all in. "I need names, Jerome. Anything you've got." Jerome hesitated for a moment, then leaned in. "Look into Westmore. Big-time developer. Half the deals he's made with the city are shady, and I'd bet some of your officers are involved in making sure those deals go smoothly." Arthur's mind raced. Westmore. It was a lead, and it was connected to the officers he'd already suspected. He thanked Jerome, leaving the cafe with a new sense of direction. Arthur gains valuable information from community leaders, providing him with a crucial lead that connects corrupt officers to powerful figures in the city. His investigation deepens as he gathers allies. It was late by the time Arthur got home, and his phone rang almost as soon as he walked through the door. Maria's name flashed across the screen. He answered, exhaustion weighing on him. "Arthur, are you okay?" Her voice was full of concern. "I'm fine," he replied, though he wasn't entirely sure it was true. "I saw the video," she continued, her tone softening. "I'm worried about you. This isn't just a job anymore. It's personal, and I know you're walking a fine line. You've always been strong, but I don't want this to destroy you." Arthur closed his eyes for a moment, letting her words sink in. "I know what I'm doing, Maria. I can handle it." "You always say that," she replied, a touch of frustration creeping in. "But there's only so much one person can handle. Please, don't lose yourself in this." Arthur smiled faintly, despite the heaviness in his chest. "I'll be careful. I promise." After a few more words of reassurance, the call ended. But Maria's voice stayed with him. She was right. This was more than just a job. It was becoming a personal battle, one that could cost him more than he'd ever anticipated. Cause/effect. Maria's concerns highlight the personal toll Arthur's investigation is taking on him. Though he reassures her, the weight of the task begins to isolate him further, pushing him deeper into the mission. Late that night, unable to sleep, Arthur pored over old case files and financial records, focusing on the connections between Victor and the corrupt network. He stumbled upon something that made him sit up straight: a series of transactions tied to Victor's father, an ex-cop who had been quietly forced into retirement years ago under mysterious circumstances. The connections became clearer as Arthur traced the threads. Victor's family had been involved in shady dealings long before Victor ever joined the force. It was likely that Victor had inherited not just his father's badge, but his dirty alliances as well. Arthur now had something concrete. Victor wasn't just a reckless cop with a racist streak. He was part of a legacy of corruption, and that legacy was still feeding into the city's power structure. Cause/effect. Arthur finds evidence linking Victor's family to the corrupt power structure, giving him a crucial piece of the puzzle. This discovery deepens Arthur's resolve, setting the stage for a more focused investigation in the coming chapters.